Shall we begin?
The one thing they love more than a hero is to see a hero fail, fall, die trying. In spite of everything you've done for them, eventually they will hate you.
So Game of Thrones, Season 8, Episode 6, The Iron Throne, is out. Game of Thrones is now officially ended. I'm told there is technically a 7th episode to this season, but it's basically a documentary where the various actors, cast, crew, and possibly the writers discuss their experiences with the show. Good, bad, silly, stupid, whatever. I don't know how many people are actually going to watch it at this point, especially there's a chance that D&D will actually be in it. As I said, their name was originally a reference to Dungeons & Dragons, which was not actually meant in a flattering way, considering the reputation Dungeons & Dragons have when using other people's work that is not their own, or more specifically their owners, Wizards of the Coast. The internet has gone on to brand D&D as meaning Dumb and Dumber, which I think is going to be a nickname that's going to stick with these guys, certainly if they continue to work in a pair. As most people are now aware of, there's actually a petition to remake the entire 8th season of Game of Thrones. Which, of course, isn't going to happen, but not because it couldn't happen. As I've mentioned before, Game of Thrones would actually not be the first show to remake a season if they were to do this. They wouldn't even be the second or third. However, with a popular live-action, well-known series, they would be the first to do that. And that's pretty much why they're not going to. One thing to keep in mind with any company, whether involved in television media or, video games or any type of thing that corporations are involved in, is that a lot of their stock, if you will, is their public image. And a lot of their public image is self-made, based off PR and the like. Remaking a season would involve admitting they made a season wrong, and they're not going to admit that. At least not until it's too late to do anything about it and nobody cares anymore, if even then. Plus, it's certainly going to be expensive to remake that sort of thing, not to mention get everyone's schedules for all the actors, crew, cast, and whatnot back together as well. It would not be unaffordable if they were to up and say, we're going to remake the season because we needed to make this right with the fans. It would make lots of money. I mean, fans would be ecstatic. It'd be the talk of the internet. They would generate so much press, and in the end, so much goodwill for owning up to their mistakes. They would actually make more money, which theoretically, of course, is what a business is supposed to be about. But businesses are often mired in tradition and bureaucracy, and they don't like doing things that are new and different from the way the other corporations are doing it. That type of thing you usually find in fresh and new startups. They'll experiment, they'll take the risks until they become large corporations and they stop doing that and do what all the other corporations are doing. It's just sort of the cycle of life for businesses. Unfortunately, although it also is proven to be fairly sustainable, a lot of these businesses have been around for a long time. So, I mean, obviously there are pros and cons to it. But there are other issues involving this. HBO, I actually don't hold to blame for this, and really shouldn't be held to blame for the most part. They actually wanted 10 seasons of Game of Thrones. and that is what they tried to, contract with the writers and cast and crew. I'm not quite sure what the cast and crew wanted, but the writers did not want to do 10 seasons. I'm told that the most they really wanted to do was 7 seasons. In fact, the only thing the writers really wanted to do was get to the Red Wedding. That was it. They wanted to be the ones to translate the Red Wedding to the screen. After that, they didn't really care. So that, of course, happened during the 3rd season of Game of Thrones. And a lot of people say the first 3 seasons are the best. Well, now you know the reason why. The first 3 seasons were all the writers really wanted to do. It's all they were really interested in doing. After that, they wanted out. They eventually agreed to do 7 seasons of the show. HBO managed to get them to compromise on 8. Again, the writers wanted 7, HBO wanted 10, so they kind of compromised for 8. However, we didn't get a full 8th season either because they only did the 6th episode. Again, I don't count the 7th as a proper episode. It's just a documentary type episode. So, I mean, a lot of this falls on the shoulders of the writers. They're the ones that wanted to do this. I'm not sure why they weren't swapped out for different writers then. I mean, it's not that unusual for a TV show to have more than one writer throughout its lifespan. And they certainly could have left the project to have other writers come in. So I'm not sure if it was a case of greed on their part. They didn't want anyone else to be able to take claim for any other part of Game of Thrones. This might actually be the fault of J.R.R. Martin, because he was extremely particular about what writers he would allow to write Game of Thrones. He actually had a meeting with them. I believe his own words described as from before lunch to after dinner was the length of the meeting. And he had a rather bizarre requirement to allow them to become writers. They had to be able to correctly guess the parentage of Jon Snow. I suppose that could be shown as proof of their passion for his writing, but that is a really bizarre requirement that doesn't really have anything to do with being a good writer, as is obvious now. He really should have chosen writers based off the merits of their work rather than the level of their fandom of his work. Being a fan is important. Don't get me wrong, we've seen a lot of work be ruined because the person writing it doesn't care about the franchise. They're only here to make a quick buck and get out. So you definitely want someone that has passion for your work. But you also want someone who has the skill for it, who actually has the ability to pull it off and the desire to stick with it, which these writers didn't. And granted, back then no one knew if Game of Thrones was going to be successful. They probably thought they'd be lucky to get 3 seasons, and then they'd be off the hook. No one expected it to become a phenomenon. But D&D don't care. They just want out. I've also been told that the cast, the actors, they also want out. That they are tired of playing the same parts and do want to play other parts. So that's another factor, and another reason why a reshoot of the season's not going to happen, because they're done with the series. They want out, or at least a large number of them do. I'm not necessarily sure if it's all of them. But many of them have gone on to have other, parts in other movies or TV shows. So, they have careers now. Game of Thrones took them from being a cast of nobodies to being, at least America-wide. I'm not really sure if you can quite go so far to say worldwide for all of them, but at least national celebrities, and some of them have, like Peter Dinklage, have actually moved that on to being worldwide famous. But really, like I said, D&D did not want to do an 8th season. They already did what they wanted to do, and thus they started phoning it in afterwards, essentially. And with that in context, that explains these 6 episodes, why they feel so rushed. A lot of people have tried to go out pointing that Daenerys has always given signs that she's the Mad Queen. But that is deliberate obfuscation on their part. Very few people actually take an issue that Daenerys went mad. They take an issue that she went mad basically in the space of a episode. Showing some slight tendencies is not a character arc. Again, keep in mind, HBO wanted 10 seasons. So essentially, they took a 3-season character arc of Daenerys slowly spiraling into madness and crammed it into one episode, The Bells. That's the problem. It's not a bad idea, it's poor execution. It's bad writing. That is the issue that people have. The same really for the Night King and the Long Night. We spend 7 seasons building up the White Walkers and then destroy them in a single episode. Again, most people don't even necessarily have that big of an issue with exactly how he died, although that could have been better. But with just the speed at which he was killed off. Game of Thrones, I mean, people like to say that Game of Thrones is a very dark episode. If you're a fan, you're used to turning off the lights and dealing with the darkness. Thus, you shouldn't complain about the 3rd episode being so dark. Well, you also know what Game of Thrones is known for? Slow and gradual build-up. Game of Thrones is known to take its time with character development. A lot of people like that. That's why they're fans. So, when you throw that out the window and just have rapid-fire character development, if you can call it that, fans become upset, and with good reason. This is not why they are fans of the show. They are fans for the show for the way Game of Thrones has been. And they expect it to continue in that way. Not that they expect nothing to ever change, but they expect the style to be consistent. I mean, basically, you could say what you have here is a case of false advertisement. Game of Thrones has been promising to do its show and episodes in this particular style for 7 seasons, at the very least for 3 seasons, and then slowly backing off of it for the other 4. And then now, for the final season, to throw that all out the window and not do anything in its style. And, to be honest, to throw in a lot of fan service as well. One of the things about Game of Thrones is that J.R.R. Martin wrote A Song of Ice and Fire not to please fans. It was his own deconstruction and sort of anti-tropes. Hence why Game of Thrones doesn't really have a main character. It's more like a history of Westeros, or at least of this period. And thus characters can be killed off left and right at any time, regardless of whether or not the character is popular. Characters don't live or get a happy ending or special scenes because they're popular. They don't get together because fans are shipping them. And that is a significant problem in this final season. That we have a lot of fan service that's thrown in without any build-up. Brianna and Jaime getting together after the battle, for example. Could you have had a relationship between them? Sure, you could have done that, and it certainly could have been made to be believable if you had 3 seasons in which to do it. But there hasn't been any suggestion of a relationship between the two, a romantic one, in the previous 7 seasons. It's just totally a fan thing. Fans want them to get together. They want there to be a romantic connection between the two of the characters, even though the show hasn't had that. So they could have developed that if they wanted to. Instead, they just shot in fan service at that episode simply to please the fans. Even though this actually went against their intended end for Jaime. Hence, why he has to immediately break Brianna's heart to go back to Cersei and then die with her. That's what they wanted to end him with. So now his character arc, if you his progression through this final season is disjointed. and not particularly believable and doesn't make really a whole lot of sense. The so-called idiotically Clegane Bowl is another example. People want the Mountain and the Hound to fight because of the history between the characters. However, while we do see this fight, there's no reason given for the fight. The Hound just suddenly, one day, ups and goes south to fight the Mountain. Nothing's happened in between the time he's last been at King's Landing and now deciding to go back that has anything to do with him wanting to kill the Mountain. His older brother is just suddenly decided. And once they get there, nothing really prompts this fight. They're not fighting over anything. They're not even Cersei. I mean, if the Hound had come here to hoping to kill Cersei and end the conflict, and then the Mountain stepped in to protect her, now they have a reason to fight. And the fight means more because of their history. But their history, at least their particular history, not that history in general cannot be, but their particular history and their particular character arcs don't really give them a reason to start fighting, especially with the castle collapsing around them. There really isn't any reason for this fight, except that the fans wanted to see it, and they didn't have any other end for the two of them. So they just had a random fight in a collapsing stairway on the castle. Now, I thought the fight was well enough shot. I don't really have a problem. There have been a few people who have complained that the fight isn't particularly good. I don't really have that problem with it. By Game of Thrones standard, it's just a regular one-on-one fight. I don't think it's anything particularly special, but it's nothing particularly horrible either. It's just without any meaning. Even when I saw this fight for the first time, I couldn't really bring myself to really care about what was going on. Really, the only thing I was curious about is what exactly is the Mountain now? And that wasn't answered. It is pretty well established that, yes, he's undead. He gets stabbed through the head, and
You should have gone for the head.
it doesn't really slow him down all that much. But that just left me with more questions, none of which got answered. So it was very unsatisfactory. A fight that had meaning could have been made that more impactful by their history. But a fight without meaning, with a history that made it significant but didn't really support their fight, was just two guys beating at each other with flattened bits of metal. I mean, it just really wasn't what I was wanting, and wasn't what most fans were really wanting in the confrontation either. The same thing goes for Jaime and Cersei's death. This, I think, actually was less fan service and more writer service. I think they liked the poeticness of the two of them dying together. I don't know if that's what J.R.R. Martin intends to do with the characters, that they will die together. Whether they will necessarily die in this manner or in some other manner, perhaps they will kill each other, for example. But, as twins, they were born into this world together. It's somewhat poetic to have them die together, come for full circle like that. So again, I don't necessarily object to the idea, but their death was kind of so unsatisfying and anticlimactic, which the next episode, episode 6, the final episode, has made worse. Because really nothing actually killed them. One of the first scenes of episode 6 is Tyrion Lannister descending into the depths of the Red Keep to look for them, because he wants to see if they manage to escape or not. He doesn't know. And he finds the way blocked with rubble. However, where the rubble is the lightest, he sees Jaime's golden hand, and by just pushing aside a few bricks, 5 tops, he uncovers largely both of their bodies, which aren't particularly damaged either. Literally the lightest possible amount of rubble has fallen on them. I'm not necessarily convinced it would have killed both of them. Is it possible that it killed? It is possible. The human body is actually often more fragile than we give it credit for. And a brick falling at the right velocity, at the right angle, hitting them on the back of the head, say, could potentially kill them. Often it might simply do is knock them out or break some bones. Especially if Jamie was kind of holding on to Cersei, he could have easily taken the brunt of it. Meaning that she would probably have survived, maybe miscarried, if assuming she actually does have a child, which I don't know if they were lying to her on Greyjoy or not. But regardless, there's a good chance that at least with medical attention, even by medieval standards, they actually probably would have survived that. Especially considering in just the earlier episode, the mountain shielded two people, Cersei and her hand. And they both walked away unscathed from that. I mean, the mountain is undead, but still, that was a lot of debris. The fact that none of it hit them and broke a bone, opened up gashes or wounds, knocked them out anyway, is still a minor miracle in of itself. On top of that, it also would appear, had they just moved 5 steps towards the staircase, the rubble would have missed them entirely. So they need not even have died. The way the episode before the bells had ended suggested the entire floor had collapsed. Many people thought the entire castle had collapsed. I knew that wasn't going to be a thing. It's just a little bit of being genre savvy. Obviously, they're going to let the castle stay intact so they can shoot the final episode in it. But it did look like the entire floor they were on had collapsed. And nope, that's not the case according to the Iron Throne episode 6. A small portion of the ceiling above them has come down, and literally, had they not been standing right there, they would have survived, making their death just that much more pointless. Now, maybe that's meant to be symbolic. All these plays for power, all these lengths the two characters went to, and their death is so pointless, thus their lives are pointless. But that's not quite the same thing. It's kind of what we call in the business empty symbolism. That yes, this symbolism could mean something, but devoid of context that actually fits the meaning, makes that meaning void. And that is the case of this ending. It looks poetic, but it doesn't actually have any meaning in the story. Now, regardless of whether or not the cast wants to be done with Game of Thrones or not, I really don't have a problem with any of the actors. After all, 10 seasons is a long time to devote yourself to a single, show like this anyway, and be playing the same character over and over again. But regardless, the cast, I think, has always done a phenomenal job given what they have to work with. When they're given good material, they make that material so much better. Given bad material, they're still acting their hearts out. Tyrion, or Peter Dinklage, playing Tyrion, does a great performance when he finds their bodies. Nothing he does, nothing he portrays at all lessens the scene. It's solely a writing issue. It's solely the writers. I don't even have a problem with the director, with the way the scene is shot. The directors for this season have actually, I thought, been really good. Again, they don't write these scenes. They're given these scenes and told to make it work. And they direct their hearts out making it work. Also, if you don't know, there's actually more than one director. Different episodes have different directors, so it's not even the same guy. Often, depending on what an episode is, such as an episode with a large-scale battle, will have the battle director in charge of it, whereas a episode that deals more with small character developing moments will have a different director who specializes in that. And I really think all 6 episodes of season 8 have been very well shot. If there are mistakes, nothing's perfect, and these mistakes are minor and would just be nitpicky really for the most part. I think that direction has been good. The special effects largely have been good. There are a few missteps here and there, but again, that's kind of part of the course. You spend your budget on when the special effects are most important, and sometimes the minor effects get skimped out a little bit. A good example of this is Drogon. Most of his scenes that he appears in are really, really good. When he's buried in snow, when Jon walks by and he suddenly erupts out of the ground, so looks fantastic. Also, if the final scene where Drogon is in the ruins of the Great Hall with the Iron Throne, I mean, special effects, graphics-wise, amazing. The speech scene, where Daenerys comes walking out to the top of the staircase and Drogon is further behind her and spreads his wings. The intention is to give her a sort of fallen angel or even demonic look, as you can't actually see Drogon, but you can see his wings, which look like they're Daenerys' wings now. Again, a cool visual concept, but the wings look so fake in that shot. This looks like a PlayStation rendering. It does not look at all convincing. You can tell those are fake wings. And it ruins the shot quite a bit. Plus, the symbolism is a little bit too on the nose. A little too over dramatic for Game of Thrones, especially for this season, which really hasn't earned any dramatic moments given the bad writing and characters' developments and arcs just being thrown out. And there are issues even within the same scene. After finding the bodies of his siblings, Tyrion returns to Daenerys after she's given this speech on the stairs and basically commits suicide. Suicide by cop, if you will. Not that he necessarily tries to kill himself, but he deliberately tries to get Daenerys to kill him. She has now been informed that Jaime Lannister has been set free. So she tells him that he's committed treason. He points out that, well, she just, he saved his brother and she massacred a city, including women and children. He then pulls off his badge of office and throws it down the stairs. Now, again, as far as a shot goes, this is a cool, dramatic shot. It looks cool. You definitely have some, get the feels here. The problem is that Tyrion has always been portrayed as a survivor, willing to go whatever lengths he has to in order to survive. And now he just walks out and commits suicide. Tyrion, as he's been portrayed at this point, would have either A, initiated a coup of some kind, like the Spider tried to do before, or B, would have just got out of Dodge. He would have simply left town, gone, found a little dinghy, a little rowboat, and rowed off. Now, granted, it's a bit hard for Tyrion to disappear into the world, given his stature. He can't help but attract attention. If Daenerys wanted to hunt him down, she probably could very easily. But he still would have tried. He would have gone back north to Sansa, for example. I mean, she's basically on the verge of trying to formulate a rebellion against Daenerys anyway. And the wildlings don't owe her anything, and they're on fairly good terms with the Northmen right now. So, I mean, that's what Tyrion would have done, because that's what we've been told is his character. It's the way Game of Thrones has portrayed him. And now he just goes out and commits suicide. Because he's unhappy with the way things have turned out. I mean, it's so much against his character. On top of that, Daenerys has just ordered all prisoners be killed. It's something Jon currently has a problem with, and he's waiting in the wings for the speech to be over so that he can talk to her about that. But does Daenerys take Tyrion prisoner, or does she kill him? Oh, no, she takes him prisoner, despite the fact she's been killing all prisoners. So the Unsullied escort him off. And on top of that, there's like a dozen men, Unsullied, in the corridor to the room they're holding him prisoner in. I mean, granted, I would put, say, 4 men to guard him, 2 to actively watch the door, and 2 to relieve them. But no, she's got, literally a dozen men lined up in this hallway. I'm not quite sure what she thinks Tyrion's going to pull, or what someone's going to pull to rescue Tyrion, but he's way overguarded. But I guess she has the men. Another thing the speech scene reveals is that all the Dothraki are alive, including the ones killed in the Long Night. They're all alive. Literally, her entire Dothraki army is at the bottom of the stairs. And it seems like a good number of the Unsullied are back, too. I'd say that she has 2/3 of her original force of Unsullied at minimum in this scene. And now you can't say she recruited new people, because these are a specific band of people, not something you could simply recruit, or conscript people into. The Dothraki are a nation, a race. The Unsullied are a group of slave-trained eunuchs. It's not something you could just grab someone and stick the armor or the animal skins on and give them a horse. Doesn't work that way. Not to mention, they're not going to become skilled enough to be part of these groups either. Both the Unsullied and the Dothraki are actually elite forces in the world of Game of Thrones or A Song of Ice and Fire. The Dothraki have toppled empires on their own, in certainly larger numbers than Daenerys has. And the Unsullied are considered one of the supreme fighting forces of the world, one of the few forces capable of actually standing up to the Dothraki. But regardless, they're all back, essentially. So she has her entire army again, or very near to it. But regardless, Jon Snow then goes to see Tyrion, and they have a conversation about basically what to do about Daenerys. And one of the first things Jon says to Tyrion is that he can't defend what Daenerys has done. He won't. So Tyrion then makes a point about how bad what Daenerys has done, massacring an innocent town, and Jon immediately steps forward and starts defending her. And Tyrion doesn't call him out on this either. They just continue on as if Jon had never said that he can't and won't defend her actions. It's the same scene. We've not even cut away to see what someone else is doing and then cut back to them. So there's no time jump either. This is all just one conversation. It just shows how rushed this episode is. Normally what you would have for a movie or TV episode is a continuity editor. This is someone who watches the show, the episode, before it's finished to make sure that nothing, contradicts it, both visually and in dialogue. And it seems like they didn't have that here, probably because that would have been an extra step and would have made it take longer to make the episode. So they don't have a continuity editor now. They just threw that job out. And certainly keep in mind, from the writers, D&D's point of view, they don't care. They didn't want to make this season. After the Red Wedding, their job was done as far as they are concerned. So you can see why a lot of this just doesn't really work. Now, Daenerys is, again, major spoilers if you've not seen the episode, but Daenerys' death scene is extremely predictable. I don't think anyone watching Jon walk into the Iron Throne Grand Hall there didn't see what was going to happen. Daenerys gives kind of a mad speech, basically validating a lot of Tyrion's points. Basically, Tyrion's argument boils down to that she's been told she's in the right so often, and has even fortunately been in the right so often, that she's no longer capable of self-doubt. Anything she does is automatically the right thing because she did it. So there's no longer any question in her mind that what she's doing is right. And she gave a speech, as I said before, in which she has said that the reunification of Westeros is not enough. She's going to, as she calls it, break the wheel. That is, get rid of the old systems of nobility and kings and tyrants, and liberate people all over the world so they can be free under her rule. She's literally going to do world domination.
Of course!
And of course, the Dothraki and the Unsullied will follow her to conquer the world. Although I'm pretty sure she already rules most of the world, at least the known world. I mean, at least south of the Wall, she rules Westeros now. And I'm pretty sure she rules most of the continent across the Narrow Sea, too. I mean, maybe she didn't quite visit every place on it. And there are plenty of island nations as well that surround both continents. And who knows, maybe there are other continents. I'm not necessarily convinced that there are, but there certainly could be. I mean, that's up to J.R.R. Martin. He can do whatever he wants. His world. But, at least for the known world, I'm pretty sure she rules about 9/10 of it technically already. At least 9/10 of the continents. So she wouldn't even have that much further to go. However, of course, while the Dothraki and the Unsullied will follow her anywhere, the people of Westeros really aren't interested in ruling the world. Certainly got a lot of their own world to rebuild. So, as I said, when Jon does finally confront Daenerys before the Iron Throne, she validates what Tyrion has said. She's convinced she's in the right because she's special. She's convinced that Jon, because he loves her and is important to her, that he's also special, and therefore she tells him he need not worry about whether he's doing the right or wrong thing. If he's doing it, it's automatically, therefore, the right thing. You get circular logic, basically, which is a trap that a lot of people fall into. Not necessarily going mad, but it's a common fallacy of logic. But in her, basically, I guess, maddened state, she can't see that and can't be reasoned with. And like I said, her descent to madness is pretty dang quick. In fact, one has to wonder if it's even permanent. She fell into this state so quickly that, maybe given some time, a couple of days, a week or two, if she might not kind of, come back out of it and be like, oh my God, what have I done? But we'll never know. Jon, kisses her, tells her that she'll always be his queen, which right there telegraphed to the audience, he's about to kill her. And sure enough, beneath the camera where we can't see, he stabs her with his knife. And she dies, I believe without a word even, at that point. Again, I thought fairly well acted, especially on the actor, Kit, or whatever his name is, that plays Jon. I thought it was really well done here. And this leads to, one of the better special effects of the episode, but so many questions. Since the castle now doesn't have a roof, Drogon flies up. Now, I'm not sure what necessarily signaled him to come up at this moment, but sure enough, he flies up and lands into the Great Hall. And the question we're left with is, how intelligent are dragons? I mean, they've been shown as cunning enough, like a wolf or a shark, but not as actually sentient or sapient. So you're left here wondering, does the dragon know what's happened? Is he able to put two and two together? I mean, definitely, he shouldn't see Jon as a threat to Daenerys. I mean, he's seen them making out. So he definitely knows that she's not threatened by him. Whether he necessarily understands, mating rituals and not, especially on human versions of those, I don't know. Again, how intelligent are the dragons? So he comes into the scene, he starts sniffing, he looks back and forth between the two of them. There's a pool of blood under Daenerys. But granted, he didn't actually see Jon stab her. So the question is, can he put two and two together? And I thought for a moment maybe he would, because the camera zooms in and they show the knife still sticking into Daenerys. Now again, I'm not sure the dragon is actually smart enough to know what that is, but it is going to have Jon's scent on it. Plus the scent of blood, plus Daenerys not moving. That actually might be enough for an intelligent animal to kind of pick on that something untoward has just happened. And given, are dragons more intelligent than the average animal? I mean, it's often said that the dolphin is the most intelligent animal on Earth, although I think octopuses are in the running for that as well. But, I mean, dragons could theoretically be smarter than that. So I'm not sure if, is he able to put two and two together. And again, for a moment, they definitely make it look that way. After showing the knife, in her stomach there, or abdomen, the dragon arcs its head back, its mouth opens up, fire starts coming out, Jon closes his eyes. Definitely thinks he's about to go the way of the spider. Instead, the dragon melts the Iron Throne. Again, how intelligent are dragons? Does the dragon know that chair is essentially the reason why Daenerys is dead? That's what she's been fighting towards all this time? What she was trying to reclaim? I mean, keep in mind, he has never seen the Iron Throne before. I don't know how how he would know, even if he's heard the name, which I'm not sure she's ever mentioned it in his presence. But even if she has, how does he know that that is the Iron Throne that she's been talking about? I mean, this would be something that would make sense for a sentient or sapient creature to have, realized that she's died because of this chair. And had they just stayed in Essos, his mother and his two brothers would still be alive. And so, in his rage and his despair, melts it. But we've never been given any indication that Drogon is that smart. Dragon notwithstanding, he's still just an animal. For the shot taken of itself, it's a very dramatic and theatrical, well done shot that has a lot of symbolism to it. But given the context, that symbolism doesn't actually work. It's not actually there. It's devoid of any actual meaning. And it doesn't make sense. Afterwards, Drogon picks Daenerys up in his claw and flies out over the ocean, vanishing into the mist clouds. Where is he going? I mean, back to Dragonstone? Is he going back to Essos? I mean, does Drogon even have... Again, we could say he's going home, but where is his home exactly? Does he... I mean, Daenerys never really stayed in one spot. So, is he going back to Valerion, where the Targaryens come from? And where dragons are said to come from whence no one ever returns? I mean, I don't know. It's just, he just ups and goes. The next scene, we do a time jump. And it turns out that Jon Snow is now the prisoner of Grey Worm. Which, again, doesn't really make sense. Grey Worm was officially named her Master of War, which I think he was anyway. I'm pretty sure he was the highest ranking military officer in her army, under her. So, but she made it official during her speech. So that technically means that he is essentially in charge of her empire. Not that necessarily the empire, if you will accept that, of course. But technically speaking, with her hand having quit and been taken prisoner, I'm pretty sure it means he's in charge. But again, why would he take Jon prisoner? And why would Jon tell Grey Worm what he's done? Because keep in mind, there have been no witnesses. And the evidence is gone now as well. There's blood on the floor of the Great Hall next to the melted throne, but that's it. I mean, Jon could walk out there and claim anything he wants. In fact, I'm not sure even that anyone even knew he was in there with her. It's possible there were some unsullied guards, somewhere along the way that he passed to get there, but dude could have just walked out and kept going. I don't think anyone would have known what happened in there. He could have come out there and claimed Drogon went mad and melted the throne and killed Daenerys. He could have claimed that she came to realize what she had done, was horrified. She destroyed the throne by ordering Drogon to melt it and then flew off, intending to never return because she couldn't live with what she... I mean, he could have said anything. Now, granted, he's super ridiculously honest now in this final season, but basically he had to turn himself in exactly like Tyrion did in order to now be a prisoner of Grey Worm. And then Grey Worm doesn't kill him. And again, people have pointed out he was just executing prisoners. Technically, he did take a prisoner because Tyrion was taken prisoner by Daenerys. So I guess because that's her last order, take prisoners, now he takes prisoners. And he must have kept Jon for a minimum of 2 weeks. Because this next scene takes place in the same meeting that they took place last season. When they met, I don't remember what the place is called, but where the Northerners and such met with Cersei to convince her that the White Walkers were real and brought a zombie. We're back in that place now. And everyone, all the leaders and / important people over Westeros are there. As I believe, between Winterfell and King's Landing is at least a 2-week journey. Maybe this place is slightly closer. But keep in mind, you also have to send a messenger from King's Landing to Winterfell to arrange this meeting. Assuming there's no back and forth either, that they just accept it. Not to mention people from other places. The leader of Dorne was also there, for example. I'm pretty sure, the Vale, Theon's sister, who's now the leader of the Greyjoys, the Iron Islands, she's there. So you'd had to have arranged this meeting, and even assuming that there's no discussion amongst themselves first, again, they're all in the same location, so be messengers back and forth there too. Definitely a large amount of time has gone by. Like I say, minimum of 2 weeks, if not more. And Grey Worm hasn't killed Jon during this whole time. He's also not killed Tyrion, but I don't necessarily know that he necessarily has a big reason to kill Tyrion anyway. Anyway, this council has arrived. We've got Sansa, we've got Arya, who showed up briefly to talk to Jon earlier but didn't do anything. We've got Bran, who, wheelchair, doubtless need extra accommodations for the trip. We've also got Sam, who I guess he's in charge of House Tully now, maybe? I'm not sure why he's there. And a couple of other characters who I think I've seen occasionally pop up, but I don't really remember their names or exactly what they're in charge of. Although Gendry is also there now, as he's leader of the restored House of Baratheon. And they've asked Greyjoy to come before them and bring Tyrion and Jon as well, because with Daenerys gone, they have to hash out what's going to happen now. And Greyjoy only brings Tyrion because he is going to execute Jon. I'm not sure why he hasn't done that already. Maybe it's because he's been used to being given orders, and thus, since no one's actually ordered him to do it, he's just kind of cooling his heels, not quite sure what he wants to do. Granted, killing Jon will probably start a war with the North, and maybe that's why he hasn't done it. He's hoping to talk them out of, appeal to their sense of honor and justice, and talk them out of attacking him. It's heavily implied, in fact, that the Northern Army is camped outside King's Landing. We don't see it, and it's never directly discussed, but Sansa does make it out as if the Northerners are essentially besieging the city with the Dothraki and the Unsullied trapped within. Which is quite possible when Jon Snow never showed up. He's technically the leader of their army, that particular division, if you will. That when he never showed up, or maybe Grey Worm marched out and said, hey, by the way, I took your leader prisoner because he killed the queen, that they didn't take it very well. And demanded his freedom, besieged the city, and maybe that's the stalemate that's going on. Again, that's me kind of working it out from implications. They never say that. And again, good story writing is if something's that important, confirm it. It's one thing to, imply secrets or motivation, but it's another thing to have, this is an important plot point, but we don't actually establish it. It's a case of bad writing. But D&D, they don't care. And again, you would think they would care more because, after all, Game of Thrones is what they're going to be known for. Possibly the rest of their career, but quite certainly for the short term. As of the next couple of years, maybe decade, they're going to be known for this. They get attached to a larger project, it might supersede it. They are currently signed up by Disney to write the next Star Wars trilogy. And I think that's what they used this season for. This is a resume to Disney. Because this has definitely felt like it's been shot by Rian Johnson fanboys. That's what this entire season feels like it is. Like, these people want to prove that, yes, you can entrust us with your next Star Wars movies because we will shoot it and write it just like Rian Johnson has, which nobody wants. And I'm not sure. Now, again, maybe D&D belonged to a particular political bubble, and in their echo chamber, their little corner of Twitter or social media, Rian Johnson is a genius, and The Last Jedi is Star Wars at its pinnacle. It can't get better than this, has never been better than this. And so they honestly believe that everyone wants more Star Wars films that are like The Last Jedi, which of course nobody does. I'm not sure about Disney. Keep in mind, Disney has to sign off on their movies. No movie gets made without their permission. Now, there are, contracts and legal things that do restrict them. I'm told they can't fire Catherine Kennedy there, who's in charge of Lucasfilms, and that they do want her gone, but they can't get rid of her. So you do have complications like that. But nevertheless, they still had to sign off on The Last Jedi. And The Last Jedi did make money. Granted, it didn't make it nearly as much money as it could have, but it did make money. Maybe they also belong to this small bubble. I don't know. But I feel like this was that D&D wrote this last season as a love letter to Rian Johnson. I really get that feeling, especially the ending of episode 3, that this was for him, to show solidarity, to show they supported him. They support his vision, his interpretation of Star Wars, and they will carry on his legacy. Because Rian Johnson was actually contracted to write a Star Wars trilogy himself. Not just one movie, but an entire trilogy that has been put on the back burner for now. It's not been confirmed that he won't write a trilogy, but 2 Star Wars trilogies were supposed to have been started after this final Star Wars movie that no one's really caring about, Rise of Skywalker. One was by Rian Johnson, and one was by D&D. As of now, only one of these trilogies has been confirmed, and it's believed to be the D&D one. That itself has not actually been confirmed whose trilogy it is, but given what's happened with Last Jedi, it makes sense that Rian Johnson would be the one that would be either canceled or at least delayed. Again, we've not been told that there won't be a second trilogy, only that it's not been confirmed. It's not the same thing as saying it's been canceled. It could simply be pushed out and be happening after D&D's trilogy rather than happening alongside. They then start basically negotiating with Grey Worm, and it's eventually Tyrion that steps in and solves the problem. He's allowed to be back to his old intelligence prior to the last couple of seasons. And again, we have inconsistency, though, in the scene. Just like with Tyrion and Jon talking earlier, when Tyrion starts to talk, Grey Worm tells him to shut up, that he's here as a prisoner, not to talk. Tyrion agrees with him, and then keeps talking, and Grey Worm says nothing. Does not object to anything. And Tyrion establishes the loose idea of essentially there should be a democracy. That kings should no longer rule by dynasty. That you shouldn't get to be king because your dad was king, or queen because your mother was queen. That you should be actually appointed by the lords. Essentially, the 7 kingdoms will appoint one of them to be High King, Narnian style almost. And then after that king dies or resigns, that's since he couldn't quit after all, then they'll appoint a new king. Possibly they could even unthrone him. I don't know. That's not discussed, but that could certainly be worked out. They could perhaps have a vote of no confidence and appoint a different king. And so then their choices apparently only amongst themselves, however. Sam actually tries to suggest that everyone in the kingdom should have a vote. And he's laughed down. And again, I feel that's kind of a cross-scene, cross-cultural viewpoint. For us, modern-day audiences, well, of course everyone should have a vote. Right? At least everyone that, adulthood of sound mind should have a vote. But this is a medieval society in which most people can't read or write. And any math beyond the number of fingers and toes they have is beyond them. So, and how would you even be, confirm that these are honest and fair elections? I could see any lord going back to his people and then, holding a vote and then coming back and saying, yep, they all voted for me. I mean, how would you confirm that? How would you prevent, corruption or bullying or intimidating or false information? Just the groundwork for that doesn't exist yet. It's too soon, in other words, for this to happen. What you need again, I don't want to come off and sound like an argument for elitism, but you want informed, intelligent decision-making that can be guaranteed to be fair and honest. Game of Thrones Westeros can't do that right now. They can't confirm it, and apparently they need a king right now. So what needs to be done to turn this to a democracy, if that's what they wanted to do, is start a generational change. We need to found schools. We need to lay down a groundwork and network of responsible checks and balances, voting methods that can be done fair and equally. We need to decide who exactly is eligible to vote, how old do you have to be, how sound of mind do you have to be, a network of maybe who can't be allowed to vote, such as perhaps criminals or people who have committed treason and the like. Can people who, don't live in Westeros vote? Like, for example, the Unsullied. They're not native to Westeros. And Davros the Smuggler actually suggests that they found their own house and that the Unsullied become bannermen, despite the fact that this really isn't part of the culture the Unsullied come from. So again, there's no guarantee that they would stay. Or the Dothraki. The Dothraki come from another continent, in a place called the Dothraki Sea, which isn't actually a sea, but a grass plain that covers a large amount, if not the majority, of the continent across the narrow sea. I kind of assume that the Dothraki probably want to go back there. Certainly Westeros wants them to go back there. The Dothraki are essentially a mixture of the Mongols and Vikings. Instead of going on longboats, they get on their horses, rape, pillage, and plunder nearby towns and villages and cities, because they don't have any towns and villages and cities of their own. They're completely nomadic. I really doubt the people of Westeros really want the Dothraki culture getting a foothold in Westeros. I mean, they probably wouldn't have a problem if the Dothraki wanted to assimilate, but I don't necessarily see any signs that the Dothraki want to assimilate. They would probably just want to keep being the Dothraki. They think they're the greatest people on the planet, after all. So again, should they get a vote? Should they stay? What about the wildlings? Should we try to include them? And I mean, again, a lot of stuff has to be worked out, and it's not there. So we have a brief funny scene where one of the lords tries to nominate himself, and Sansa tells, I think he's their uncle of the Starks, and she tells him to sit down, that he's embarrassing himself. And just in case you didn't get that joke, they have him almost clumsily trip over himself as he goes to sit back down. It was kind of funny until then, and that kind of was a little over the top, a little too much. But basically, Tyrion then steps forward, and he nominates Bran. Basically building on the idea that the Spider earlier had said, the person who didn't want power is the best person to have it. And Bran did state earlier that he doesn't want it. Interestingly, at no point did they suggest Jon Snow. Now, granted, he did kill Daenerys, but that doesn't invalidate his claim to the throne, which was stronger than hers. After all, he's really Aegon Targaryen. He's actually the heir to the throne. And he very well perfectly still has a right to the throne. Yeah, the Unsullied and Dothraki don't want him to be king. And, by the way, Theon's sister also supports the Unsullied and Dothraki. I think this is on purpose mentioned in here. Because granted, she doesn't really have much invested in Daenerys one or the other, really. And Daenerys being gone or not doesn't really directly affect the Iron Throne, except their ships aren't going to be used to conquer the rest of the world. But she makes it clear that she does not accept Jon Snow, and that she supports the Unsullied and Dothraki, which is important to note here. Although how strongly she supports them, I don't know, it's debatable. She just simply states that she believes Jon Snow should be killed. So regardless of whether or not she's actually convicted to go to war over it, I don't know. But they don't even discuss that. And Grey Worm seems fine with whoever they pick. He just tells them to choose and doesn't even try to cast a vote himself. So Bran gets chosen. I'm not sure that's a great idea, to be honest. I think he's chosen as fan service. The fans like Bran, so he gets to be king. I mean, really, he even mentions how he mostly lives in the past. Kind of sounds like he'd just be a figurehead then, and isn't going to be really ruling the kingdom anyway. The small council will be in charge, which again, maybe that's a better thing. They're appointed they're appointed by the king, but they're still appointed to the office. So it's less monarchy, perhaps. Sort of. Beginnings of a parliament, maybe. But also, I mean, Bran is, Jon's brother. I mean, technically cousins, but again, they grew up together and thought they were brothers all their lives. They're brothers. The king has the right to pardon whoever he wants, right? So, and again, nothing stops, Bran from abdicating the throne. Even if he doesn't do it immediately. After a couple of years, he could say, yep, I'm done with the throne. Jon, you're really the heir, and you should take over. After all, we were told that Daenerys really should see Jon as a threat. Because whether he wanted the throne or not, the fact that he's the rightful heir will mean people will try to make him the king anyway. So if Jon is not killed, won't that still happen now? Bran has no right to the throne, other than that all the lords voted him into office, essentially. Kind of on the spot. But I could still see people raising a coup against Bran to put Jon on the throne. You could say, well, Jon won't fight his brother. Well, Daenerys was his lover. Why should that be any different? So that problem was not resolved. On top of that, Sansa refuses to bend the knee. She declares that the Kingdom of the North is independent, such as it used to be, and is now back to being a northern kingdom. All right, well, go Sansa. And I like Sansa, so I don't really have a problem with Sansa by any means. And Sophie Turner, her actress, phenomenal job acting. I have no problem with it at all, her depiction, given what she has to work with. But one has to wonder, how come none of the other kingdoms say, oh, wait, that's an option? Oh, no, I'm independent, too. Why should I bend the knee to a foreign king? Or, if you will, foreign, since not from their little area of the kingdom. I mean, Bran is from Westeros. But why should I follow a northerner? Why should Dorne be subservient? Why should the Reach be subservient, or the Stormlands, or the Vale? It makes no sense. On top of that, how long will her kingdom remain independent anyway? It's worth pointing out that when the Targaryen house first conquered Westeros, they never conquered Dorne. They only conquered all the other kingdoms, the other 6. They didn't conquer the 7th kingdom. Dorne actually remained independent, and over the years, as various Targaryen kings came into power and left, Dorne was eventually absorbed into Westeros and became part of Westeros, part of the 7 kingdoms. Really, won't that happen to the north too? You have all the other kingdoms together again, and on top of that, even as she's queen of the north, her brother is king of the other kingdoms. Obviously, they're going to have a very close working relationship. That's going to lead to a lot of cultural and mutual exchange between the two of them. And presumably Starks will go on to be the leader of the North, even if some other High King is voted into office, which could still be a Stark. It seems to me the Kingdom of the North probably will just be reabsorbed anyway after Sansa stops being the queen, after she dies off or whatever. And even if Bran is her brother, it won't necessarily stop someone from thinking, someone like the Spider, even if he's dead, there'll be people like him, deciding that, it would be better if the North was part of our kingdom, and politically trying to arrange it, up to and including assassinating Sansa, to make them leaderless and thus be reabsorbed back into the kingdom. On top of that, Bran basically declares that he came here to be made king. Because Tyrion asks him that, I know you don't want to be king, but if we make you king, will you accept it? And he says, that's why I'm here. Basically, saying he's, foreseen all these events. Which does lead one to wonder, if he foresaw all of this, then did he allow it to happen? I mean, granted, we don't necessarily know how much he really foresaw, but it implicates that he knew what was going to happen, or knew enough, and didn't try to stop it. Didn't try to warn anybody. Didn't try to influence events, even in, not like through time travel or something like Hodor, but actually right here and now try to, influence events for a better outcome. Makes it seem like he wanted to be king after all. That he's just playing humble. He really wanted to be king, and now he's king. Grey Worm agrees to it, and then agrees to not killing Jon Snow. Instead, Jon Snow should be exiled. He should return to the Night's Watch. The Night's Watch, which its sole purpose was to watch out for White Walkers, who don't exist anymore. Now, they tried to spin a line that, the bastards and criminals all need to go somewhere. well, like prison. The Night's Watch served a purpose. It no longer does. Now, you could say, well, we could still use somewhere where people could be sent off out of, the main culture society, but why the Night's Watch? Why not something else? Why not for, some Coast Guard or something? Some other purpose that actually serves a purpose. Why would we keep the Night's Watch around? And especially, who does the Night's Watch answer to now? Technically, they answer to the King of the Seven Kingdoms, but keep in mind that the Wall is on the other side of the North. So do they answer to the kingdom, or do they answer to the new kingdom of the North? That's a good question, too, now. Could Sansa just simply disband them? Plus, isn't Jon Snow still technically the Night's Watch commander? And if you send him back to the Night's Watch, all I would see is him being put back in charge again. Even if he's not in charge by default, he's still a hero, a war hero now. Defeater of the White Walkers, his sister killed them, but still. He led up and helped in their destruction, so it seemed like he would just end up being their commander again, and now he essentially has an army that doesn't have any other purpose anymore, which Jon Snow knows well beyond, most of the Night's Watch. So, he could declare himself the new Night King, as the leader of the Night's Watch. And in the books, that actually happened once. The Lord Commander of the Night Watch did declare himself the Night King, because there is no Night King in the books, as I'd mentioned before. So he could, become the new king north of the Wall. The wildlings all like him and kind of see him as their de facto leader in a lot of ways. So all you're doing is setting up yet another new kingdom. Now, to top this off, Grey Worm and the Unsullied then leave Westeros. Literally, one of the last scenes is them getting in a ship and sailing off to the island of Nanth, however you say it, which is where Missandei is from. I don't know if he's returning her body or not. Quite possibly that's what he's doing. They don't actually say or show a coffin or anything. But it's certainly implied that all the Unsullied are leaving with him. And there's no implication they're coming back. So he's not going to settle and become a new lord. Not that there's much purpose, because he can't really found a house. He can't have children. I guess he could just adopt somebody, but still. So, did the Dothraki go with them? We do see some of the Dothraki walking around on the docks. So the implication could be that they got on some ships and sailed over too. They probably aren't going to the island of Nanth, or Nanth or whatever, but they could still be sailing across kind of with the Dothraki, with the Unsullied, and then part ways. We don't know. We're not told what happened to the Dothraki. Possibly because they should all be dead now. So. And the writers just stuck them in there because they wanted them in there. But yeah, there's no end to their arc, if you will, because they're all gone technically. We just show them walking around just purely as a visual. I don't know. I have no idea. The show, again, maybe that final episode, they'll tie up some loose ends. I don't know. But as of episode 6, we don't know what happened to the Dothraki. You could imply they were at the docks because they were boarding ships. But, again, that's me making an educated guess at what's going on. Certainly, I would think the people of Westeros would want to ship the Dothraki out and not want them around. And they have no reason to stay, too, now that Daenerys is gone. So, it could make sense they would go back. But yeah, so they still send Jon to the Wall anyway. And after the Unsullied had set sail, they send Jon to the Wall. And again, the only reason I can think of this is how they dropped that line that the Iron Islands doesn't want Jon to be around, that they wanted to kill him, and that they agreed to him being banished. Thus, they could raise a political stink if he's not. Again, how serious this would be, especially with the Unsullied having left anyway, I don't know. I kind of think they could have, probably with Bran as king and Sansa as queen of an independent kingdom, they could have probably done whatever they wanted, and yeah, the Greyjoys would have made some sort of political protest, and that would be the end of it. But maybe Jon would be too honorable to do that. He's been banished, so he's going back regardless. I don't know. None of them try to talk him into staying. On the top of that, does he have anywhere to stay anyway? Sansa's going to go on to be queen, apparently. And Arya is going to find out what's west of Westeros. Which is a cool concept. The only thing I can think of is this is done solely to suggest a spin-off. I am told there are several spin-offs. I'm told they're prequels, but I'm also told there's more than one. So maybe this is something they're hoping will happen. That we will have an Arya adventure. I don't know if J.R.R. Martin is involved in this. I assume D&D aren't. So this could be totally divorced from the books and be totally just an HBO show thing set in the world of Game of Thrones. Or, yeah, I have no idea. I also know that I don't care as far as this series is concerned. And they spend a good amount of the final episode with her talking about it and her settings. I don't care. Telling me that she was going was enough. It has nothing to do with this series. The next episode won't be about her voyage because there isn't a next episode, not a real one. So, it's just wasted film. I don't care about her getting on. And how is she funding this anyway? Is Bran giving her the funds? Is Sansa giving her the funds? Does she really have a fortune? I mean, technically the Faceless Men are for hire, but I haven't seen her hiring herself out to anybody. And I haven't seen her doing any looting. Is she leveraging the fact she killed the Night King as, I'm owed this, so, yeah, someone gave her a ship and a crew? I don't know. Did she find someone who wants to go west of Westeros? Again, kind of more questions than answers anyway. Sansa goes back north, is declared king. Jon goes to the Wall, but it doesn't look like he actually stays there. The wildlings are waiting for him at Council Black. We even see Tormund. And I'm convinced this was edited in. They actually have a scene of him and Ghost. And yes, Jon walks over and he pets the dog. I'll note in the scene where he actually pets the dog, they are the only two people in that scene. Well, Jon is actually the only person in that scene, since Ghost is a CGI construct. But regardless, there is absolutely no one else actually in that shot. It is a close-up of Jon kneeling down and petting the dog. Oh, direwolf. I think that was edited in. I think that was a last-minute edit because of the backlash of him not having pet the dog in the earlier episodes. I could be wrong, maybe it's not, but you're going to have to show me some really hard convincing evidence of that, because I am convinced they never intended to. Even if they did convince, I will buy that they intended the reunion to happen. But I will bet you that Jon Snow didn't pet him in the original cut. That was added in last second to appease, again, fan service, to appease the fans. Which is fine. I don't care if Jon pets the dog or not. At this point, I just don't care. It's irrelevant. This does not fix Game of Thrones. This does not fix his goodbye scene to Ghost. Because they're together now anyway, so what was even the point of being goodbye? I mean, he should have just asked Tormund to watch out, to babysit the dog for him, instead of giving him to Tormund then. But regardless, he and the wildlings then go through the wall, and the gate closes behind them. Strong implication that he is going to go out and find himself another hot redhead and live. Basically, he's king of the north. I mean, granted, the wildlings don't truly have a king, but he's still going to be their equivalent of the king beyond the wall. That's what he's going to be. So, again, whether the wildlings actually establish himself as a real kingdom, but there is essentially another independent kingdom now. So, the final major scene is a small council. We are confirmed that Bronn is the leader, or the new ruler of Highgarden. Fine and well. He's also the master of coin because of fan service. It is amusing here. Davros is also in here, master of ships, and he actually corrects Bronn's grammar. This is significant because it actually means he's the only character to have a consistent, completed character arc. Davros the Smuggler was introduced as an illiterate man taught to read by a child, and has gone from being unable to read to correctly correcting other people's grammar. He has the only complete story arc in the show. And I quite like his character. I have no idea why he was in the front lines of combat during the Bells, because he literally marches in side by side with Jon Snow. Totally not what his character would do. But, like I said, everyone acts out of character, so you can't hold that against him. But I do feel like he actually had a completed story arc. Sam is also here. I'm not sure why. It would make sense if Jon Snow was king. But, no, he's randomly the Grand Maester or whatever. And the history of the show has been written in show, and it's entitled A Song of Fire and Ice. Again, total fan service. There's no reason they would call it that. Sam actually claims credit for that title. Fire and Ice makes some sense. The White Walkers were essentially ice zombies, and a large portion of them were destroyed through the use of dragons. Right? Daenerys' dragons played an important role. Although on both sides, because the White Walkers had undead dragons, so that kind of cancels that out a little bit. And the dragons weren't actually the ones to kill, but still they were involved. But why a song? Where does the song come from? This book itself is not a song, it's a history book. But, yeah. On top of that, there's an earlier scene where Brianna of Tarth is basically writing Jaime Lannister's obituary in there. Why? I don't really know. Why isn't the Maester writing it? On top of that, again, showing the rushed ending to this. This is back in the day of you had an ink well full of, a pool of wet ink and a quill which you would dip in and then write. It's not a pencil or even a pen. Which even some pens you have to be careful. Because that means this stuff has to dry. Takes several minutes, if not an hour plus, to dry. She writes it, turns the page, writes on the other end, closes the book. Alright, she has just smeared and smushed all of the stuff she has just written. That is not what you do with a quill and ink and a book. Back in a medieval setting like that. That stuff has to dry. But again, modern sensibilities. With pencils and even some pens, you can write like that and not care. Even typewriters with ink, a lot of times they only need a couple of seconds to dry, if that at all, depending on how it is. But yeah, this is, again, no research done, no line of thought done into it. People pointed this out too before, where the people manning the scorpion crossbows were told to fire. Fire, as a word referencing a projectile, did not come into use until gunpowder was invented, because you would light the gunpowder with fire. When you would be told to load the gun, prep the gun, and fire the gun by lighting it on fire. We associate any kind of projectile with fire because that's how you shoot it. It's some sort of fire, typically. But back in the day, the word would have been loose or release, not fire. But again, no research, no continuity editor, nothing. So there's a joke that Tyrion isn't mentioned in A Song of Ice and Fire, which actually would have been funny had he been a character like the Night King made up for the series, thus explaining why he's not in the books. But the imp is in the books, so it's just kind of dumb. It's all around just kind of dumb. Apparently, Brianna is also, I guess, the Kingsguard commander. She was certainly wearing the armor, along with her squire. And she sits down at the small council as well, which, again, fan service. I mean, I don't mind if she's on the council, or on or off the council, but why is she on the council? Like I said, she should have died in The Long Night. Her character arc was complete. She should have been killed off. She was kept around simply for fan service, which again is fine of itself. Fan service, despite the hordes of anime watchers who will try to tell you otherwise, isn't in of itself bad or wrong, but it's just not Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones doesn't do fan service. It's just totally against its style. But D&D don't care, so she is. So yeah, there is a petition. I believe it has over 1 million signatures right now. And I would totally support what many other creators have said. Subscribe to that petition and unsubscribe to HBO. Not because they'll actually redo it. Not because they can't, but because they won't. But just send a message. This is one of the only ways you can send a message. If you are a fan of Game of Thrones, if you care about what the show has happened, if you hate what it's become, sign that petition and unsubscribe to HBO. Even if you later on end up subscribing to them again, just do it now. A mass unsubscription sends a message that you cannot do this. I don't care what kind of legal bureaucracy you got entangled in. You could have done something. Canceled the show, got new writers on board, arranged something. And also send a message to Disney, right? These guys are going on to write the next Star Wars trilogy. We don't want them to, or at least we don't want them to write it the way this was written, the Rian Johnson style. So send a message that this is not what we want. This is not acceptable. This will not lead to profits. They either need to write themselves and straighten up, or they need to be kept from writing the series. At least from flagship writing. You could bring them on to write parts of it, but have someone else in charge. As of right now, I'm told D&D have gone dark. They've gone off the grid. They're holed up in a cabin with bottles of wine and their wives. Again, they're rich as is right now, so they can kick back and not care. They're off social media, and they're basically hiding. Of course, that's not going to work. People will wait for them to come back, but at the same time, people won't be as angry by then. It will have blown over. The harshest part of the lashback will have blown itself out by then. There'll be people waiting, but they'll just be trolls at this point. Not that I necessarily discourage you. If you want to wait around and try to question them on this, if they ever do a meet and greet in person to answer questions of anything, I totally encourage people in a nice, polite way to confront them about Game of Thrones, about why they put in a subpar effort. And how that we don't really think that's acceptable. We don't want them to go on to do that with other franchises. I mean, Star Wars has been essentially destroyed right now. It doesn't mean Star Wars can't be resurrected. If they, for a new trilogy, brought on great writers who were fans, who actually wanted to see it through and not just to some favorite scene, respected the fans, wanted to honor what came before, as in pre-Disney Wars. I mean, really, Disney Wars should be thrown out. I don't consider... People will refer to the old Star Wars as legacy and Disney Star Wars as canon. I don't consider Disney Wars canon. Disney Wars is an alternate universe, just like the Star Trek films, just like Discovery, just like apparently the Picard series will be if it does get off the ground. This is an alternate Star Wars universe. We should just toss it out and adhere back to the true canon and make movies based off of that. There are many good books that could be turned into movies. There are even prequel stuff, as in prequel to the prequels. Knights of the Old Republic era. I would love to see Revan done right. He is my favorite Sith Lord, who may, spoilers, not even actually be a Sith Lord. One of the few Sith Lords who took the title to actually do good and not evil. I think you could have a really, really interesting character development for Revan, if done right. I don't want D&D to write his story. They will ruin it. They will ruin Revan. They will turn him into a trope, a joke, into a generic Sith Lord if they do that. And I would hate that. And I think a message does need to be sent. So, if the only way you can do that is to subscribe to the petition and unsubscribe to HBO, yeah, do it. Absolutely, I 100% support that. Regardless, that's my opinion on what went wrong with Game of Thrones, as well as the final episode. If you liked and enjoyed this content and would like to see more, feel free to subscribe, like, and share. It helps boost this to other viewers. And you can check out my channel. I did review actually every episode of the final season of Game of Thrones, so you're more than willing to check out those. Also, feel free to bookmark the channel. YouTube basically only will notify you of large subscriber-based. And not even that, really. Only of corporations. TV channels that hold YouTube. TV companies, news media. They're the only people they'll notify you of. So if you want to keep abreast of your favorite content creators, absolutely you should bookmark them on whatever internet browser you use: Internet Explorer, Chrome, Firefox, Opera, Mozilla, Pale Moon, whatever you use. Bookmark the channel so that you can every day or every couple of days check the channel for new content. That is the best way to keep abreast with your favorite creators. So feel free to bookmark mine if you are so inclined. If you agree or disagree with anything I've said, or have more information or corrections, or just want to voice your opinion about the show or me, feel free to comment below. Feel free to post your favorite memes, jokes, whatever. Everyone's welcome. Until next time, my friends, thanks for listening.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shore of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the darkness.